Good morning, everybody. This is Dwayne DeFries. I'm going to take a second here and share my screen, and we'll get going. Looks like we still have a few people signing in. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Dwayne DeFries, Executive Director of the IRL Council and the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. I've got the easy job today. I'm going to be setting the stage for our webinar speakers, but I do want to share some slides with you to just, get you ready for what we're about to do. For those of you who may not be aware, the Indian River Lagoon is one of 28 estuaries that have been dedicated by the U.S. Congress as an estuary of national significance. We're authorized under Section 320 of the Clean Water Act and part of the National Estuary Program administered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The Indian River Lagoon has suffered repeated seasonal harmful algal blooms since 2011 that have impaired water quality, reduced seagrass coverage. In fact, the recent estimates are about 89% loss of coverage, and impacted the health of many estuary species, including the Florida manatee. This photo in the title slide shows what we looked like back in 2020 during a fairly intense bloom of a nanocyanobacteria. In this webinar today, we're going to demonstrate the power of the GeoCollaborate platform to improve not just multi-agency data sharing, but communication as we respond to a harmful algal bloom. Our speakers will deliver a hypothetical scenario using real data from the 2016 brown tide bloom and fish mortality event that occurred in 2016, as well as pulling some other relevant data to show you the power of GeoCollaborate. We're going to first acknowledge our funder on this project. We have received funding from Florida DEP from their Harmful Algal Bloom Innovative Technology Grants Program. This is a very important program because it allows testing of new technologies and innovations with harmful algal blooms, and we're really pleased to have had that support. So thank you, DEP. We will be sharing, the results of this through the year and in final documentation when we finish the project. Our project team is extensive, and I want to introduce everybody. You'll hear from a few today. We have Dave Jones and also Dr. Ellen Prager. Both are with Storm Center Communications. Dave is the CEO and founder of Storm Center. Ellen is the senior scientist. We also have Dr. Chuck Jacoby with St. John's River Water Management District, and Dennis Hanasak with Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. Both Chuck and Dennis are serving as our senior scientists on the project, but are also our primary sources for large and long data sets on water quality and harmful algal blooms. And then from the National Estuary Program is our team, KJ Ayers, who has been doing almost all of the data QA, QC, and doing GIS operations. You'll hear from KJ later. And the rest of my team, Ashley Malcolm and Kathy Hill, who are in charge of kind of communicating out our findings and helping us with this webinar, and Dan Kolodny, who serves as our contract manager. So this is where we've been and kind of where we're headed after today. So we started this project by data testing, bringing in large data sets. KJ ran through the QA/QC applications and also training on the GeoCollaborate platform to look at how we take those data and then bring those trusted data into GeoCollaborate to use, and you'll see that today. In phase 2, we did a hindcast of harmful algal bloom data. That occurred in December 2021 and also in January 2022. And much like this week, we did 4 separate sessions back then. If you weren't able to join us back then, you can find those sessions on our YouTube channel, and either Ashley or KJ maybe go ahead and post that link up on the chat room so our viewers can just grab it, copy it and grab it. And so we will also be posting all of the information and questions and answers from today's session and this week's also on our YouTube channel in the next few weeks. Today, we're going to look at the Indian River Lagoon from an emergency scenario planning perspective. And so we are going to bring data in to show you how these data sets can be viewed in a geospatial platform to aid in making decisions and operationalize data for emergency planning and response. And then late in 2022, and I'll talk about this a little later, we're going to showcase GeoCollaborate as a platform for a statewide harmful algal bloom information center. And so that's going to be the phases of the project. But where this all began really was looking at the changes that were occurring in the Indian River Lagoon with these multiple harmful algal blooms seasonally occurring, and then having a really intense brown tide bloom in 2016 that resulted in a historic fish kill event, fish mortality event. In this picture, you can see the brown tide and what it looks like from 2012, the first year that we had seen brown tide. 2016 was not only that intensive, but actually covered even more acreage. And so we began to ask the question, how do we respond more effectively as a interagency working group? And we called together a number of representatives from different agencies. And over the last couple of years, since fall of 2020, we first began meeting weekly, every Friday on a call. And we'd go down this list of 17 agencies and their representatives to ask, what data do you have this week? What are you seeing on the water if you're out there? What are you seeing from, public input? And then we would talk about how we're communicating out to both citizens, elected officials, and the media. So it's that call that is going to be the framework for how we conduct business today with this webinar. And we're going to simulate how that call works as we move forward. So this is how we're going to move from here. We're going to demonstrate how data can be operationalized for decision making. I'm going to turn this platform over to Dave Jones, who will first introduce GeoCollaborate. If you weren't able to join us back in December or January, just to give you a big picture of what the platform and the software does. And then Chuck Jacoby is going to actually go through the sequence of data calls that we make through the agencies. And Dave will be operating GeoCollaborate so you can see those discussions as we would do them in a meeting. And then KJ will wrap up and give you some kind of summary observations about the needs for operational readiness to really make GeoCollaborate function at its highest level. We'll then move to about a half an hour of audience questions and answers. And we've got a relatively small group, so we're going to really look to you. If you have a question, put it in the chat room. All questions are great. We love having that discussion with you all. And so we want to see you interacting with us on the chat room. And then what we'll do is we'll go through your questions as they come in and have a discussion. And if you want to, feedback through the chat, we can, and have a bit of a discussion, answer your questions. All of those will be taken in a written context, made available on the YouTube channel, and then I'll do a wrap up on lessons learned. And so that's going to be our webinar for today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave. Dave is the CEO and the founder of Storm Center Communications. And it was Storm Center's team that created the GeoCollaborate software platform. So Dave, take it away.
Thanks, Dwayne, very much. And I appreciate everyone joining on the webinar on this Friday. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen I'm going to do two things with screen sharing. First, I'm going to share some PowerPoint slides where I just want to give you an overview, as Dwayne said, about what GeoCollaborate does and how it operates. And then I'm going to switch to my desktop to show you a split screen of GeoCollaborate in the leader-follower perspective. So first of all, what is GeoCollaborate? GeoCollaborate is a technology that we developed over the last several years under the federal government's Small Business Innovation Research Program. And it's a new technology that allows active collaboration and unification of trusted data sets. So many of you have probably tried to go to websites and pull data from different websites. I'm going to show you a diagram where GeoCollaborate brings those disparate data sets together in this collaborative environment. It took us a while, 6-7 years or so, to make it look very easy to use. And that interface is something that we've gotten a lot of kudos on for not too complex. And it also works across platforms. So it works across tablets, laptops, mobile devices, any device with a web browser and a connection to the internet. One thing we really do like to make sure of that you understand fully is that GeoCollaborate does not replace any web sites, hubs, portals, or data servers. It actually relies on those data servers to pull data from, so it can share across the followers and the dashboards. And what we mean by that is, if you're wanting to drive more traffic, more accesses to your data, or you want more people to discover your data, one of the very effective ways to do that is through GeoCollaborate, where a collaboration session is led by a subject matter expert, and then they instruct everyone else where to get the data in real time. So you actually get an increase in the number of your data accesses if you're running your own data servers. So I just want to put together a little graphic here, a little picture of multiple websites. And we've all been there. I know NOAA has a whole bunch of websites. States and other federal agencies have lots of websites and mapping portals that they want you to come to look at certain data sets. Well, this kind of represents a gamut of websites that offer trusted data. What GeoCollaborate does is it brings pulls out, extracts data from those sites, doesn't scrape them. It has direct access to REST services and web services, and pulls that together into this collaborative common operating picture. The key is here that everyone who is collaborating, who is connected as a leader, a follower, and a dashboard user, are all looking at the same map at the same time with the same data in front of them. So many times when you try to look at a collaborative common operating picture, you had to be in the same room. With GeoCollaborate, you can be anywhere in the world connected. And so once you have the data, and you can see here an on-off switch in the upper left-hand corner, once a follower turns GeoCollaborate on, then their map zooms to match the map of the leader, including all the data sets that the leader has turned on. And so by this map, you can see a whole bunch of different data sets displayed. Now, once that sharing happens, this data can be shared across any platform, as I indicated. So any laptop or mobile device or things like that that are connected will get the same data that the leader has turned on. And so this is a look at the interface of GeoCollaborate. On the left-hand side is the leader who logs in with credentials, and can turn on and off any of the trusted data sets that they've identified ahead of time, or they can load data on the fly during a collaboration session. And then the followers join by clicking on a URL. Now, in just a little bit, we're going to put a URL into the chat so you can follow along as though you were part of this internal discussion about HABs that Chuck Jacoby is going to be talking about here in just a little bit. So once you click on that link, you become a follower. And once you turn GeoCollaborate on, your map will match the map of the leader, and you will see me zoom in, zoom out, display data, and then you will be able to inquire on that data that's delivered into your web browser. Now, one of the really important things about GeoCollaborate to understand is that it's a great way to introduce new data sets to people who may or may not even know that those data sets exist. So when you're a subject matter expert and you're leading a session, you're exposing all the followers to data. Some of it might be new, some of it might be familiar and older, but that data is being unified together in a mapping environment, not a screen sharing environment. It's a real mapping, geospatial mapping environment. And the other thing that we've noticed over the years of working with GeoCollaborate and working with analysts and forecasters and those folks who have to look for lots of data to make an assessment before they make a forecast. In the past, these analysts and forecasters have spent about 80% of their time just looking for data. Where is the data that they can pull in? And 20% of their time actually issuing a forecast or spending their time on analyzing that data to make a forecast or issue a watch or a warning or anything like that. So we really think that GeoCollaborate can unlock a lot of that initial time by having a subject matter expert deliver this trusted data into that environment. And all of a sudden, much more time can be spent on taking a look at it and determining how you're going to communicate that either internally or to the public. So once a collaboration session is over, there's a dashboard that remains. And this dashboard is really important because it puts the power of moving around the map in the hands of each one of the users. And all the data sets that were shared in that collaboration session appear on the dashboard. Some of them might be clicked on, some of them might be clicked off because that's the choice of the leader. But once a dashboard user connects, they have total control as to whether they want to zoom in closer to the area of interest or they want to turn on or turn off data sets that were shared. That really hands off the data to that organization where you can turn around and then brief internally what's going on in your area or how this data that you just received from the subject matter expert might enable you to make decisions and improve your situational awareness. The dashboard's open 365, 24/7, and the data that updates or the data that's delivered into the dashboard will update automatically. So if you're looking at a NOAA satellite picture, that data will update when the data updates. So you always have the latest information there in front of you. So what I'm going to do here in just a second is I'm going to show you a split screen. And in the split screen, I'm going to have the leader on the left-hand side and the follower on the right-hand side. And so in the chat, in the chat, we will share that address. It's right up here in the top of the PowerPoint, and you will become a follower. So you will follow us in real time. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to start sharing my desktop that has the split screen in front of me. So here we go. We're going to share that. And now you should be able to see the split screen where I have logged in on the left-hand side as the leader. And on the right-hand side, when you click on that link to follow, you'll see a map load up, and it'll be this blank map, this bright base map. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, move around the country if you want to. But once you turn GeoCollaborate on by clicking this switch, then your map is going to zoom down to match my map. Now the base map will be different. You'll still have that sort of bright base map, and the key points window will pop up in front of you as well. You can move that around. I'll just put it over here on the lower right-hand side of the key points, but you can also change your base map. If you want to display a satellite base map like the one I have on the left, all you have to do is deploy the menu on the left-hand side, that little arrow, click base map, and then you can choose whatever base map you want. I'll just choose National Geographic, but you might want to choose satellite base map because it's more of a realistic type look. But I'll just choose the National Geographic base map there. So hopefully you've been able to connect. You are now following live. See, as I zoom out, your map is going to zoom out as well. So now we can start to share geospatial data, and you will get that data in your web browser. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Chuck Jacoby, and Chuck's going to take us through various data sets that he might want to look at during this weekly briefing should a HAB be developing. So Chuck, take it from here.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's been pointed out, what we're going to do here is kind of walk through some of the things that we did do, and some of the things that we can do now, using GeoCollaborate as the tool to help us just present and interact with the data. The meetings, that one of the key goals was to make sure that everybody had the best available information and kind of was on the same page. But another one, and we'll walk through that today, is to try and organize a response if we needed one. If there was, say, an algal bloom that was causing a fish kill. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the first things that we'd like to do is to kind of get an overview of what's going on in the lagoon. And one of the best ways to do that is to use satellite imagery. And you'll see here a modeled chlorophyll based on satellite imagery. So we take the reflectances. We've got some people who are struggling there. I think maybe somebody can help them get linked up. Take the reflectances the satellite records. Using our water quality data from sampling, we can model the chlorophyll concentrations. So the hotter colors are higher chlorophyll concentrations, and Dave can wander around and pick out some places to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So again, we'd use this to get an idea where there might be hotspots, and this portion that you see mainly in the screen is Banana River Lagoon, and it's pretty warm, and there's a lot of phytoplankton there, high biomass. One of the other things we'd like to look at is what comprises the chlorophyll, and this can be important because some species of phytoplankton can produce toxins, so it's good to know what is making up the chlorophyll. And we use a variety of sampling programs where people collect water samples, and then the phytoplankton are counted and identified and counted. And those are shown as these dots, and Dave will find one and show you that here you can have the information about what was found. So these were nanoplankton, very small phytoplankton, which is what's characterized a lot of the recent blooms in the lagoon. And that's the cells per liter, so that 1 million cells per liter, which is plenty high enough to be a bloom. In some other cases, this is different set of data, come from different place, but still it provides you with some information about what's in there and how many units per mil there. One of the other things we can do is where we have samples that are repeated through time, we can include a time series, as it were. So this shows you the composition and intensity of bloom running from January through December, so about a year's worth. And you can see that the composition did change somewhat. The brown is brown tide, and the green are nano-eukaryotes. So we had a mixed bloom, and that composition did change through time. you can also see that between the end of September and the end of October, the bloom had pretty much crashed. So a fairly rapid change can happen. But again, this provides us a little depth of information beyond the chlorophyll. If we had toxicity, if we were concerned about toxicity, because there were species that were known to produce toxins, there is a place where we can go now to get some information, and that's the Protecting Florida Together website. And Dave's going to take us over there. So what happens here is a group's different agencies contribute by collecting samples. DEP looks for toxins, and then the information shows up on this website. This is current data, as it were, so there's no toxicity going on in the lagoon at the moment, thank goodness. But samples, and you can get the metadata and so forth if there was a sample to figure out what's going on. Okay, so when we're looking at blooms, obviously, we're concerned about what's in them and how strong they are, where they are, but we're also trying to see, what the trend might be. And one way to look at that would be to look at some of the other water quality parameters. So this is going to be temperature here. And temperatures, obviously, if the temperature drops rapidly, the bloom may crash. When blooms crash, the cells die, the bacteria degrade them, and oxygen levels fall. But another one would be potentially salinity, where if salinity changes rapidly, typically if it gets lower, we have rainfall and salinity drops. So again, we can pull up those data and look for places where that's going on.
And Chuck, if I could just add just real quickly to the folks that are following in real time, as you see me on the screen share clicking on data sets, you can also, if you're following in real time, click and inquire on some of this data that I'm displaying, as well as the point data. Thanks, Chuck.
Sure, Dave, that was great. One of the obvious and most important things that we would look at is changes in dissolved oxygen concentrations. Again, if dissolved oxygen falls below 2 milligrams per liter, that's when fish and other aquatic animals start to struggle. So here we've pulled together dissolved oxygen, and all of these last three efforts are done by trying to interpolate among the sampling points. To get a little broader and more inclusive picture of what's going on out there. So again, there's a range of points that are sampled, and then we've tried to interpolate between them. This works well for some of the parameters and not so well for others. So some are just not organized spatially that well. But here you can see DO is generally pretty good, but we would be able to identify spots where it wasn't. One of the other things that we're trying to build into the concept is to look a little bit ahead and see if we can get a handle on where things are going in the future. And for that, we would try to pull in information about some things like air temperatures, wind speeds and direction, and whether we're going to have cloudy days, which would come through precipitation types information. But we look at air temperatures. This is the forecast rain, Dave, is that right?
Yeah, I clicked on the wind speed actually, Chuck. Sorry, this is a forecast wind speed in certain areas. So you can see as you click on that, it comes up with this is actually grids directly from the National Weather Service. So it kind of gives you an idea for what the wind speed forecast is, and then these arrows are actual stations.
And again, these forecasts can help us understand a little bit about where the bloom might go. So the lagoon is driven pretty heavily by winds, and so we've seen blooms that move through the system clockwise and blooms that move counterclockwise, depending on where the winds come from and how strong they are. So maybe you can pull up the satellite cloud cover. And again, this will be cloud cover from basically probably a few minutes ago. But it gives you an idea of the kind of information you can draw into the considerations.
I'm going to change my base map as well, Chuck, by deploying this menu and turning on the satellite base map so it gets a little bit darker. And anyone that's following, if you're seeing data sets that may not be consistent with what Chuck is doing, you can always, in the circle part up here in your web browser, you can always refresh your browser at any time and then turn GeoCollaborate back on. And when you turn GeoCollaborate back on, all of the data sets that the leader has turned on will reload. So now you can see the satellite picture. There's a few thunderstorms off the coast of Florida right now. And then you can see the winds coming in from the north and then the east. Okay, Chuck.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, we seem to have some people are having a little trouble getting to the GeoCollaborate site. So maybe if we can put that link back in there so they can pull that down, that'd be good. So again, getting an idea of what's going on with the weather, meteorological conditions will be important for understanding where blooms might go. Another thing that we can get hold of, and people find to be really important, would be understanding where there are or reports of fish kills. And so we can pull those data in from a variety of different places, different sources. Some of it, comes from field sampling. Some of it comes from people calling into the fish kill hotline that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission runs. And we can display that and show where that is relative to other things like chlorophyll concentration or low DO. So here you have points, and there the little phone symbols are the call-ins to the Fish and Wildlife Hotline. And you can look at where they're distributed and get some idea where the fish kills seem to be the most intense. Can have images. People send images. You can connect those images up so you get an idea of the scale of what you're talking about. You can, put out messages again about what's going on in the polygon that's been drawn there. And again, that'll stay on that dashboard that we'll talk about in a little bit, so people can have access to that. This is the kind of thing you could show if we had toxicity issues. The Department of Health would put up a warning sign, and you can show people that these things are out there. Another thing for fish kills would be to make sure that we had an executive order to be able to collect the fish, because it's not legal to collect them without permission. And so we can again link that up here if you want people want to see where that order applies and how long it applies, and some of the other background information.
And Chuck, I'm just going to go ahead, and this is the outline for the executive order, and that pops out. When you click on it, you can get access to that executive order if anybody needs it. There you go.
There you go. So okay, so then another thing obviously would be trying to plan ahead. So if you're getting concentrations of these calls like we see here in Banana River Lagoon around Cocoa Beach, you want to take a look at things like boat ramps. So you can pull up the boat ramp distribution, and that would be the place where people would launch and recover, as well as where you could deploy dumpsters that would take the fish that people collect. And again, you may identify gaps where you have to come up with a different way to do things than having a dumpster at a boat ramp. And potentially, one of the most useful features is the fact that once the group that was in the meeting decides what it is important to transmit more broadly, we can set that up in a dashboard, and that'll be there and available, as David said before, 24/7, 365, with updates if things update. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave now and have him walk you through the dashboard in a little more detail.
Thanks, Chuck. What I'm sharing here in my screen is the follower. So as a leader, I was moving in on another system and the follower was following in real time. But when the collaboration session here, like Chuck said, is over, we have a dashboard. And this dashboard, at any time, you can refresh it. If you go to the dashboard live, it's simply the same address, just /dashboard. And you'll see that the same information that was shared that Chuck called for is displayed on the left-hand side of this dashboard as well. The key points can be moved around, can be open or closed. Any notes can be put in here, like when the next collaboration session is, next briefing is, what other types of information could be useful for interpreting the data, perhaps. I'll close the key points window, and then here's a legend here as well. And the legend itself, you can close, and you can click on any of the data that's displayed. Now, one of the things that you can do with the dashboard as well is you can immediately take the data that was delivered to you and do a briefing. So if you had a large monitor over your shoulder, or you were doing a press briefing, or even the media had access to it, they could then connect to the dashboard and go into media presentation mode. And that basically gets rid of a lot of extraneous information and displays the data at hand. And the dashboard is the map is fully movable. You can move around to any location that you want, and you can inquire on any of the data that you'd like. And so if you wanted to look at this geospatial message down here, you can click on that, and then that would come up full screen. So if you had some sort of touch monitor, you could just touch this with your fingers, and this information would pop out. If you wanted to zoom in a little bit closer on where some of these fish kill reports were coming from, then you could click on them and see what was reported. But it's all full screen, and you can even go to a specific address if you wanted to by clicking in this location and typing it in. But again, everything is totally interactive. One other thing that I wanted to point out, and that is each dashboard user can also do an estimate of population. And so they can just click on that little population tool and do a freehand polygon and just say, well, how many people are affected in this area right here? And so what the system is doing is it's going out live to the Socioeconomic Data Application Center at Columbia University in New York City. And it's taking that polygon that I drew and extracting the population. And you can see the population here now in 2000, 2005, 10, 15, and 20 for the area that I outlined. This was all done as a live web service, geospatial data extraction, with another very powerful supercomputer that's up in New York City. So it shows you don't have to have that compute power on premises to get this type of information. So now we're going to turn to KJ because KJ is all about data, which is awesome. She's done a lot of the data preparation that goes into GeoCollaborate, and she's going to talk about data and data trust and data quality. So KJ, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, everybody. Let me just... So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the questions we received in our first instance about data types, data formats, and GeoCollaborate. So just to kind of go over some of the security, permission, and accessibility portions, data that comes into GeoCollaborate is only being viewed or displayed. It's not being downloaded, meaning that the original data provider is the way that they intended it to be displayed is how it will be displayed into GeoCollaborate. Also, data can only be accessed if given permission from the original data provider. So if a data set is public, of course, we can bring that into GeoCollaborate, but also too, if for some reason they wanted to do password protected, it's totally up to the data provider. And the data provider also has the ability to turn off their data if they no longer want it to be displayed. It should also be noted that credit is always given to the owner creator. So it can either be pulled up in the metadata, or we can add it as like the layer name. So for example, the FWC fish kill, I got a CSV from the fish kill hotline, so I put that in the title as Florida Fish and Wildlife's, I think it was March of 2016, their fish kill hotline. GeoCollaborate's leader is also password protected, meaning that the URLs or the data sources or the data streams, those URLs, only the leader has access to them. But that doesn't mean that other links can't be provided if the user or data provider wants more access to data portals or hubs. So currently, these are the data types that are currently accepted by GeoCollaborate. So there's both discrete and continuous data sets, so vector and raster geospatial formats. So anything from KML or KMZs like Google Earth snapshots, to tabular data like Excel and CSV files, to high resolution raster imageries like NAPE, NOAA Real Earth, NOAA RSD. So there's a lot of variability on the different data types. If you look down at the bottom, I put a little caveat. There's additional formats can be added. So new data types and new data formats are constantly coming out. So GeoCollaborate is trying to stay on top of that. So if your data is in another data format, you can speak directly with GeoCollaborate and they can add that as an additional option to bring in data types. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about data in the future. So data that's undergone quality assurance and quality control is necessary for any sort of operational readiness or operational decision making. Provisional data can be used, but there needs to be a caveat with that and can only be used for informational purposes. There's flexibility to discuss the way that your data is displayed. So there is the differentiation between both of them. And just coming from like a GIS professional, the way to access data is kind of moving toward web-based services. So it's a lot easier to go to our URL than it is to send somebody a very large CSV file or give them access to like a SQL database, for example. So kind of starting to push people to put their data into web services, kind of the way of the future. With that being said, we're kind of looking forward to bringing more people into this project and more data sets into GeoCollaborate to see how we can communicate and show data for our next instance, especially when we're looking at the entire state of Florida. With that being said, we're hoping that other groups will want to work with us and kind of push their data into those web services. So that's kind of my summary. So I also put in here my contact information. If you have any questions about data types, data formats, quality assurance, quality control, you can reach out to me. I can answer your questions to the best of my abilities. And again, thank you for FDUP for allowing us to do this project. And then now I'm going to move into the Q&A sessions. So if you guys have any questions, if you could please put them in the chat box, and we'd love to answer them.
Thanks, KJ. I see we have one question so far. I'm sure a lot of people are still playing around on the dashboard, exploring the data. So first question I have, and this is probably for you, KJ, is somebody missed how to add the layers for the water quality data, like the pH, DO, salinity. So if you want to talk about how those layers were came about, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just reading the question again. So in the actual instance itself, if you are in the follower, if the leader has it up, the leader can basically turn on those layers if they want to be displayed. Same thing with the dashboard. So if the leader turned those off, they won't necessarily display in the dashboard. Dave, you want to kind of help me with this a little bit too? I think I answered that.
Yeah, and so when the leader prepares to have a collaboration session, they can identify any location that's offering a REST service, dynamic, CSV files, things like that, and then add them into GeoCollaborate. Anybody can add them if you have leader credentials. So I wasn't sure too about the question whether or not it was from KJ, your data preparation standpoint, or when we were turning them on and off when Chuck was calling for them. It was just a simple on-off switch when you add the data layers into GeoCollaborate as a leader.
I'm sorry if I say your name wrong, but Mr. Lopez, if you want to explain more about like the data processing part of it, if you put that in the chat, I can explain that as well.
Dan, let me jump in just to reiterate. Dave mentioned it earlier when we go to the dashboard, but the leader will decide, what's on that dashboard when it's posted, and can have data updating on a regular basis. So, for example, if the media or a citizen wants to, check the dashboard at 3 in the morning, you could go in, see what's going on with that updated data, but you would decide from the leader side what actual data would be showing for that outward, public interaction or media interaction. And so you've got a lot of options to choose how you want to share data and how much data you want to share.
And I'll just
Thanks,
add into that.
Greg.
I'm sorry, Daniel. I was just going to add into that what Dwayne said is it really adds a lot of flexibility for if you want to have internal collaboration sessions. Perhaps you have different scientists that want to collaborate to compare data sets from different sensors, or you want to have a public facing dashboard, which the leader can then turn off other data that you might not want to share out.
All right, thanks, Dave. The next question we have is, can the leader be changed during a collaboration session?
Yes. So a collaboration session can be, from a leader perspective, can be handed off to others with credentials to be a leader. So you could have numerous people that may have data to share or take the lead as a subject matter expert, and leadership can be handed over. Only one leader at a time, though. We've done tests with multiple leaders at a time, and that doesn't work very well. Lots of people want to be leader.
Thanks, Dave. Can more metadata be added to layers in GeoCollaborate? For example, the addresses for the boat ramps?
I can answer that. So it basically depends on however the data provider displayed their data set. So if they had a data column that basically contained that address, we could add it as like into the pop-up, but it's being displayed how the original data provider created. So if it's not in there, then not necessarily.
All right, thanks, KJ. The next question is the goal to have a statewide extent for instances, or will this be mostly intended for localized regional event response tools?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that, and then maybe Dwayne, you can chime in. GeoCollaborate is very flexible and extensible and scalable. So the goal for this IRL project was to see how we could use it to help coordinate with emergency response for HABs, to take a look at past data, and also to then extend it with the next webinar that we're going to be doing across the state to help with coordination and situational awareness. But it could be used to connect other national estuary programs together. It could be used to track projects. It could be used in many different ways to improve situational awareness and decision-making. So, Dwayne?
Yeah, that's great, Dave. And remember that, we're testing this for the very first time ever with harmful algal bloom data. The initial design of this by, Dave and his team, they were looking at trying to have a platform that could use any kind of data. So for example, if we wanted to compare, the 4 national estuaries in Florida and have all of our projects pop up, as data sets where we could see those projects in a geospatial scale, we could use it for projects. And so there's no limitation on, if you wanted to go local, and really fine tune this down. And you could see the way Dave was, operating the system. You can get really granular and fine tuned in the geographic scale and look, for example, what's happening, in a county, and their watershed, or you can kind of zoom it out and start looking at the whole Indian River Lagoon, or the whole state of Florida. And so that's the power of taking these data and moving it to a geospatial format, is you can really look at it from different perspectives and scales to get a sense of what's happening, both real time, but also, if you start setting these up. In our first session, we had KJ actually kind of integrating, some time series on Esri with GeoCollaborate. So there's all sorts of ways that you can take this tool and apply it to either operationalize data or visualize it, to answer questions, view trends, even talk about, methodologies. So it's very adaptable to specific needs.
Thanks, Dwayne. Next question we have here is if an agency who has data wants to provide it as a service, what exactly does that entail? And how does GeoCollaborate ensure the data can't be manipulated after permission is given for its use?
I can take that one, and Dave, you can kind of add to it. So basically, if a data provider wants to give permission for GeoCollaborate to use it, they just need to publish it as a web service so that they can publish it to an Esri online account. They can have it just basically so it's publicly accessible. I'm just going to go with that. And then to make sure that's not manipulated, however, Dave, I'm kind of tripping up. You want to help me a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and you said it exactly right, KJ. If you set up your data as a service, and it can be, if you are an Esri user, you can set it up as a dynamic service, a feature service, things like that. But you can also set it up. There's open source servers like GeoServer and things like that. You can set it up to feed into GeoCollaborate. The key thing about how GeoCollaborate works is because it accesses those data services, it means that no user is downloading and saving the data. So the data cannot be manipulated before it gets to all of the users or all of the followers. And we also ensure in the collaboration session that each follower is getting the data directly from that trusted source. So we do not at Storm Center download and save that data. We don't keep it anywhere. We don't reserve it. We make sure that all the followers are pointed to your server and your data as a service, which, if you remember in the beginning of the webinar, I mentioned that's why GeoCollaborate can really up your metrics for the number of data accesses into your service and your data servers.
Thank you for
Thanks,
tagging
KJ.
me.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
This next question, probably KJ can touch on. Is there an example of how we qualify the data being shown? How will the data be shown as provisional or qualified?
So we only used one example. We used the St. John's River Water Management, their monthly sampling collections, just because the purpose of GeoCollaborate isn't to basically change data. It's basically just to show examples. But for that, we put flags to basically like identify, we marked in flags in the metadata. So it'll show up in the pop-up.
Let me jump in. We all here, especially those of us who are in management, everybody wants real time. And we talked about this in our first session, but when you have real-time data, you very often you don't have the, that heavy QA QC. So you have to understand, the difference between, that raw provisional, and trusted data, especially if you're going to be making, decisions about policy or decisions about emergency response. And so if you were going to do a mix of data, and Dave actually showed an example, some of the photos. So imagine if we were having a harmful algal bloom and that was real time, you might have individuals on boats literally uploading photographs, from their phones to a URL, which you could see near real time, and not a whole lot of risk with that, other than you've got a photo and you have a location. But with data sets, you do want to identify, what level they're at, if they are provisional or if they've gone through QA/QC. So everybody knows kind of the limitations of those datas.
Yeah, and like kind of the purpose of this project isn't for the NEP necessarily to do that QA/QC. It's to kind of have other data providers do it themselves or mark the level of quality assurance and quality control they have with their data sets. So I wish I had all the time in the world to go through and QA/QC everybody's data sets, but I don't. There's too many things going on. So it's necessarily up to the data provider, but we also can put that flag in the metadata.
Thanks, everybody. Is there any more questions? I don't see any at this time. Give a couple more minutes to see if anybody has anything else.
And while people are thinking about perhaps other questions, I noticed in the chat there was at least one person that was having a little issue connecting to the site. I put my email address in the chat, so I'd be happy to work with anybody on connecting and doing a little collaborating. Dwayne, I think, is going to do a little poll later too. But if you really have a desire to connect, I'd be happy to chat with you.
That's great. Dan, if you take down the Q&A slide, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to do a quick wrap up, and actually we'll have a polling question to get some feedback from you all. First and foremost, thanks for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your taking the time on a Friday. We're going to deliver one more session this afternoon, and that'll be 4 sessions of this instance, and then we'll move on to the later stages of this project. We just want to remind you again that not just this session, but our first session, those will be available on that YouTube link in the chat room. So some lessons learned, and I'm going to just touch base on a couple. We've learned a lot about data. We've actually learned a lot in just manipulating our data through GeoCollaborate and seeing, some gaps and some opportunities to think about our monitoring system. But first and foremost, and I'll say this every time we meet, the value of a robust monitoring system for the Indian River Lagoon that delivers relevant data at multiple spatial and temporal scales, the value of that just cannot be overstated. That when we have really good data, trusted data, and data that relates to either management decision-making, or tracking trends, whether it's water quality or habitats, that is the information and knowledge that will drive really good policy and management decisions. And I want to just add that although it's not a deliverable from this project per se, the National Estuary Program is in the process of developing a One Lagoon monitoring plan with contract support from Dr. Dennis Hanasak at Harbor Branch. We hope to have that plan available in a draft sometime in the next 60 days, and it'll be on the street for a while to get good peer review and a lot of comments, and we'll edit accordingly. So if any of you are particularly interested in reviewing that document, just indicate that on the chat room. But we're going to send that out widely to all of our stakeholders and partners when it's ready. The next point is that the value of GeoCollaborate to enhance data sharing and communication, it's clear that in an emergency event, this type of tool is very, very valuable. But don't forget that you can use this tool, with stakeholders and scientific meetings to really, drive deep into a data set. And then the dashboard itself provides current information that can be used in many different ways, updated and made available 24/7. So, the options that GeoCollaborate deliver for better communication, coordination, and then action is really high. And then lastly, this ability, and Dave mentioned this, that GeoCollaborate delivers to you if you're representing an agency or an organization that's interested in accelerating data access. You can use GeoCollaborate to accelerate data access from your websites, your portals, your hubs. And so it is synergistically very valuable and complementary to the things you're doing already with data. Our next instance session is scheduled, not yet scheduled, but will be scheduled for sometime in fall 2022. We're going to take data not only from the Indian River Lagoon, but also Lake Okeechobee, some of the cyanobacteria data, and also data probably we're going to look at Tampa Bay, but we may go beyond that to showcase how GeoCollaborate could be used as a harmful algal bloom dashboard for the state of Florida, and give you an idea of what that statewide dashboard might look like. So those of you who may have data, make sure, especially if it's bloom data in Lake Okeechobee or also Tampa Bay, Ashley and the whole team and KJ, we're going to be reaching out to try to get more data sets with Chuck Jacoby, and also Dennis to bring those into the GeoCollaborate platform. And we hope you'll join us, in that fall set of sessions. And then we'd like to do a poll survey. I know we noticed that, one of you is having a little trouble linking, and we've had some feedback already that folks would really like to do just a straight up training session with the Storm Center communication team, where it's an interactive training to see what buttons to push, how you would negotiate the platform if you were a leader with multiple followers. So Ashley, if you would pop up that live poll survey, we just want to get a sense of how many of you would like to participate in a training session. And then what we'll do is schedule a session sometime between now and our fall next instance, and try to get as many of you working directly with Dave and his team to learn how to actually negotiate the platform itself. So we'll give you a minute to go ahead and reply to this poll. And then Ashley, I'll let you decide. Don't leave it up too long, but let's see how everybody's looking. We've had really good feedback, by the way. It's been above 80%. Everybody, wants to get on a platform with Dave and his team and play a little bit. And actually, my team, we're all pretty excited to do that ourselves. We'll give you a minute to answer the poll, get it loaded back, and then Ashley will show us the results. Yep, we're right about at that 80% here too, 78% yes. And so what we'll do is when we schedule this, we'll reach out to everybody, and just invite you to a training platform. We may do 2 of these if we've got a lot of response, just to make it handleable. So stay tuned. You'll get a direct email from us on those training sessions. And Ashley, you're going to need to pop out of your screen for me to get control again.
I'm out. You can continue.
I'm going to have to stop. It's not advancing. And we had this technical problem yesterday as well. So I'm going to just stop and reload. See if that works. There we go. Yeah, it just froze up a little bit. If you want general information, if you want to interact a little bit more, just talk about, the possibilities, feel free to contact me directly. You know, if it's technical, you know, Dave and his team are always available, and we'll pass those technical questions on to Dave. But if you have direct technical or data questions, contact KJ directly, and then just copy Dan, so we can track your questions. And very often what we'll do is we'll post those email questions as well, and track those so we can build a good data set of questions and answers, which will be posted on the YouTube. And then lastly, I just want to thank you all for your time. You know, it's for many, it's a holiday and religious weekend coming up. And so we wish you a happy weekend. Be safe. If you want more information about what we're doing with the National Estuary Program, check us out on onelagoon.org, and have a wonderful Friday. Thank you.